Many thanks for staying with us earlier. The President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, addressed the nation. And in that broadcast, the President extended by 14 days restrictions in Abuja, the nation's capital, Lagos, the nation's commercial nerve center, and Ogun State, which borders Lagos, Nigeria. And that is effective 11:59 p.m. today. That's taken to for 4 weeks, that is 1 month, the restriction on movement in those 3 locations in the country. In that speech, the president commended those at the front line of the fight against the pandemic, acknowledging their immense work and, of course, acknowledging the fact that the period is actually bringing a lot of hardship to Nigerians, but that it is necessary in order to win the war against the pandemic. Our Deputy Bureau Chief in Abuja, Femi Akande, joins me for more on the President's speech. Femi, thank you for joining us at this time. Well, now the restriction has been extended by 2 whole weeks. Were you expecting this? All right, we'll connect with Femi shortly, but let's join African Affairs Analyst Ademola Oshodi, who is joining us to share his thoughts on the President's address. You've heard it. You, just like every other Nigerian in Lagos, Abuja, and Ogun, would have to be home again for the next 14 days. How do you react?
Thank you. I think it's necessary. I want to believe the President got the best advice from medical and other experts around the world regarding the necessity of it. We've been pretty fortunate so far in Nigeria with the low contamination rate and also with the very low death rate, but we shouldn't take things for granted. So I think the government has taken a very bold step and to, realizing the fact that though things are relatively calm compared to other parts of the world, especially the northern hemisphere, Lagos and Abuja and Ogun State needs to continue the restrictions of movement to enhance that social distancing.
Well, you called it a bold step. The president said this is not a joke. It is a matter of life and death. So does that underscore the fact that government actually sees this as a real big issue that should be fully handled?
No, absolutely. It's a life and death issue. It's beyond what any humanity has seen in decades. I think the last major global death in this range was probably the Second World War, whereby people died in different parts of the world. This is definitely a very tragic situation that needs very, very strong measures. So the 2 weeks is basically something that fits into that. If you look at the deaths in the Northern Hemisphere, in America, well over 10,000, in Italy, in the UK, people were pretty shocked the fact that in Africa the death rate is pretty low, but we do not want to take this for granted. Hence President Buhari's very bold and courageous step in extending the lockdown. And I think I commend him for that.
All right, in that speech, the president listed some objectives of the lockdown, the presidential task force, and all they are doing at this time is to protect fellow Nigerians living here and then to preserve the livelihood of Nigerians. Do you see this extension achieving these core objectives?
We all hope so. We all pray so. I know. For instance, Lagos State has taken bold steps also in providing the community active case search, whereby they go to individual houses. I want to believe in samples around all the local governments of Lagos State and checking if the virus is actually in the population without it being detected. So that itself needs more days to go through to perform. So that could be part of the president's judgment in ensuring that Lagos State, Abuja, and Ogun State have the right things in place, the testings, to ensure that we're not missing out on things. And again, the 14 Chinese medical experts that just arrived the country, I want to believe their presence here is to ensure that we're going taking the right path and the right technique and expertise, ensuring that we have this virus contained. I know the Chinese medical staff are under the 14-day quarantine. This could be part of the judgment of the president, ensuring that their presence in this country is actually utilized for the well-being of the country. But we have to commend the government for its bold step. It's very expensive, measures it's taken to alleviate the population. This virus has brought out the best and the worst in humanity. People are helping people. The charities everywhere. Everybody's submitting money and food. And there's also bringing out a lot of hoodlums and violence and discrimination, racism.
All right, Ademola, just hang in there. Let's bring in our Deputy Bureau Chief in Abuja, Femi Akande. Femi, this lockdown has been extended by 14 days. Did you see this coming?
Well, not everyone saw this coming. We tried to ask the chairman of the Presidential Task Force that question, if this law will be reviewed, maybe there will be an extension, but he refused to preempt the president. But according to the president, he followed advice of the Presidential Task Force, and indeed he says this is a difficult decision to take, but he feels that it is in the best interest of the country. Following this advice of the Presidential Task Force, they are beginning to say, to see an evidence that this lockdown is a sure way of slowing down the spread of the coronavirus, and they advise the president rightly in this regard to extend it by another 14 days, with hopes that at the end of this lockdown, that curve of transmission would have been flattened.
Femi, daily you've attended the briefing of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. Between when this all began and now, what changes, what improvements have you noticed?
Well, one thing that the Presidential Task Force says they have been able to improve upon is the palliatives distributed to the vulnerable. And even looking at the president's speech, the president has already ordered that this social register that contains the name of 2.6 million vulnerables be expanded to accommodate 3.6 million people. People have always wondered why it's just 2.6 million people that is on that register that was compiled in 2016. So this has always been a contentious issue. Even at the daily briefings of the Presidential Task Force, this question always comes up, posed to the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management. But now according to the minister, they were able to devise new strategy of sharing these palliatives. People also question the methods of sharing, and again the principle of social distancing during this sharing of palliatives were not adhered to, but now they have been able to come up with new strategies based on people's concerns about their approach. But all of these are beginning to change, and moving forward, we're expecting a new register, according to the president, that will be ready at the end of this week and be presented to the president. And that means more Nigerians, more vulnerable people will be captured in the social register that would grant them access to palliatives given out by the president to cushion the effect of this lockdown necessitated by the outbreak of COVID-19.
Well, Femi, while the initial 14 days of the lockdown lasted, there have been increased cases of violence, of crime in Lagos and Ogun State. People are not sleeping at night. Certain hashtags are trending on social media: Ogun unrest, Lagos unrest, and we understand the IGP is deploying police officers to man the streets to ensure that people are not robbed of their properties. What more do you know about that?
Yes, the latest we have seen is from the IGP ordering a deployment of operatives to these restive areas, that is Lagos and Ogun State. And even the chairman of the Presidential Task Force, that's the secretary to the government of the Federation, told us that earlier today he held a meeting with security operatives, and that would include the IGP and other security chiefs in the country. And he says that they have developed a new strategy to ensure that citizens are kept safe at this period. It goes beyond enforcing the lockdowns, putting up barricades on major roads in the country, and restricting movement people in their homes, locked up in their homes, would also need to feel safe. And that is what the federal government is assuring, that moving forward, that would be guaranteed, the safety of lives and property. They say it's a responsibility of government, and he told us today that the government will not abdicate that responsibility, and a new strategy has been developed to secure the citizens who are locked up in their houses as a result of this restriction imposed by the president.
All right, very quickly, let me bring in Ademola. One more question before we call it a day at this time. The president is looking at extending the palliatives from 2.6 million households to 3.6 million households in the next 2 weeks. How realistic do you see this?
Well, it's a new thing, so they will have that challenge on their hand. I believe it's achievable. They just have to use the various institutions and organizations on ground. There's also a lot of charities involved. There's a lot of donations. The state governments and local governments and a lot of industries are involved. So I believe it's achievable. I even believe right now we've exceeded that with the charity and the good works by Nigerians all around the country. So it's a great thing, and I believe that it will bring out the best in us, in the best in our humanity.
I must sincerely appreciate you for joining us at this time. Ademola Oshodi, African Affairs Analyst, and Femi Akande, a Deputy Bureau Chief in Abuja. Do have a great evening.